Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Tuesday, May 29th, 2018, coming up on 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Whenever there's a holiday weekend, a 3-day weekend, the whole week, I'm thrown off. I have to double check to make sure I know what day of the week it is, but it is Tuesday. Okay, we've got quite a bit going on, so I'm going to get right to it, and I'm going to start off with the satellite loop that's off to my left, and what you can see on it, the remnants, the remnant circulation, and it's a fairly intact circulation and rather impressive looking of Subtropical Storm Alberto, Alberto, which is moving very slowly northward, now entering into south central Tennessee. But what I want to show you here is the extent of the feed of tropical moisture that is running from the Caribbean straight north over Cuba, over Florida, and into the southeastern part of the United States. This is a very rich, moisture-laden environment that we're dealing with, a deep tropical flow of moisture. And as a result, we're getting some hefty rains in some places, falling pretty much as advertised by both the Hurricane Center and the local National Weather Service offices. And it's just one of many puzzle pieces that we're going to have to deal with going forward as far as the weather is concerned. Now, the latest 7-day rainfall from WPC, the weather prediction people, from the National Weather Service, and you can see it here. I'll bring it a little over so you can also see the scale on the other side and match up with the colors. And looks like we're going into a bit of a wet period over the next week with, of course, the front-loaded rains that are occurring right now, and that's over in western Tennessee and Kentucky, with the remnants of Alberto will be on the order of several inches or more. In the northeast, moving up from northern Virginia in through New Jersey to about New York City, kind of on the edge of 1.5 to 2 inches, and I think much of this is going to be back-end loaded as we get into the Saturday through Tuesday time frame. And then in Florida, we're looking at amounts, looks like the whole state gets, except for the extreme south, getting at least 1.5 inches of liquid and some pockets of higher amounts as well. They've been, you folks in Florida have gotten a considerable amount of rain. It hasn't been uniform on a daily basis. Some places are getting it today, other places are not, but it looks like a relatively wet period for the rest of this week and into this weekend. Kind of busy on the national scene tonight as we look at the watches and warnings, and this is as of 6 p.m. Eastern Time. In fact, I'm going to give this a quick reboot to make sure that we've got the latest, because if there are changes, we want to make sure that we have them front and center. And it looks like we're okay here, and it'll pop off and pop on again. Okay, so in the green areas in western North Carolina, western Virginia, down through western South Carolina, much of Georgia, much of Alabama except the south and southeast, and then back through Tennessee and western Kentucky, southern Illinois, southernmost Indiana, a large area of flood watches. And you can see in the little red boxes there that show up, there are some flash flood warnings that have already been posted. We have heat advisories in southwestern Texas. We have a severe thunderstorm watch, an area of severe thunderstorm watches running up from central and northeast Kansas on up through parts of eastern Nebraska, western Iowa, into southern Minnesota, where temperatures, by the way, reached 100 degrees in some places yesterday. We also have a tornado watch in a small area from southern Kansas into western Oklahoma, and a few areas out as you go to the west where they've got some wind issues going on, so some various wind advisories, high wind watches, and so on being posted. Much of the northeast is dry, no big issues as far as what's going on shower and thunderstorm wise in Florida at the moment, so that's a good thing. The Storm Prediction Center comes front and center now, and we'll look at the risk of severe weather And of course the overlaid boxes will tell you where the watch boxes are at the moment. And it's mainly the plains, south to north, from Oklahoma all the way up to Minnesota, that large area of slight risk with a small area of enhanced risk in western Oklahoma, southern Kansas. That's where we have that tornado watch outlined, and of course the blue boxes, severe thunderstorm watches that are posted up further north. We also have a marginal risk of severe weather indicated for parts of Georgia, western South Carolina, on up into Tennessee and Kentucky, all of this reflecting the circulation of what's left of subtropical storm Alberto. And that moisture is going to continue over the next few days, but it is going to kind of fan itself out a little bit. In terms of the heavier rains, you're seeing them being played out now and into Wednesday, but as that moisture starts to shift eastward on Thursday, I think it becomes less of a factor. But here's the look of the radar this evening. Again, this is as of 6 o'clock Eastern time, the southeast regional radar, and the circulation signature on the radar is still very, very evident there as it moves up into northern Alabama. And in fact, let me just really quick, I'm going to freshen this image up too, so we have the latest echoes. You also can see, this again, when we showed you that that feeder band of moisture coming up from the Caribbean across Cuba into Florida, and it's playing out with these areas of downpours and embedded thunderstorms that are moving northward. Right now, we've got a fairly heavy area of rain up in central and northeast Florida, heading up, looks like, toward Jacksonville and north of Orlando. Then there's a bit of a break from there south. There's some isolated cells, and then you've got another big blotch that's coming off of western Cuba at the moment, and that is moving up northward. Also, notice in eastern Georgia, there's a fairly impressive line of thunderstorms there, producing some very heavy rains. You see them in the reds here. So these types of, when you got this really rich tropical air, this is where the thunderstorms oftentimes really play themselves out in terms of very heavy rainfalls, and not really so much in terms of wind. So that is at least a good thing, and that's why we only have that small marginal risk of severe weather that is covering the southeastern part of the United States. Now, I want to jump forward to the long range. If you check the image that I had on the descriptor to this video tonight, I pulled the upper air from the GFS for Sunday, and I have the one here for Saturday night, and it's really important because of the pattern that we're going to be evolving in. We're going into a blocking pattern in the atmosphere, and this is going to create some rather interesting weather across the eastern part of the U.S., and particularly for my neck of the woods, in that we are probably going to get into a prolonged period of cloud cover and rain, and make things rather dismal. But let me just show you how we get there. If you envision the fact that normally everything in the atmosphere wants to move from west to east, that's actually not really a good thing to say, because it's rare that we really see that type of upper air where things are pretty much moving from west to east, and the flow is relatively flat. There's always going to be ridges and troughs all over the place, displacing jet streams in one direction or another. And in this instance, if you think back to late February, early March, when we went into this blocking pattern, an upper high that forms up in the North Atlantic, and that basically suppresses the jet stream south of normal. Well, we have that developing now. There's a rather strong upper high that shows up here near Iceland, and that's going to be building up northwestward into Greenland. So what that does is that it basically displaces the whole jet stream pattern south of normal. So you wind up with something that looks like this, and embedded in all of this will be areas of energy that'll be moving along. The northern part, the jet kind of splits here in the eastern states, and you can see that there's a ridge here in eastern Canada. Well, that's going to be reflected at the surface by a big surface high that is going to build. So what happens with that? Well, clockwise winds around highs, and you've got problems with winds coming in from the northeast and east off the cool, or in some cases cold, Atlantic Ocean. If you've got a warm boundary, in other words, if you've got the boundary line, the stationary front that would form between that cool air and very warm to hot air to the south, if that's close by, you could wind up with getting some very heavy rains. But in this particular instance, that boundary is going to be a bit too far south. On the other hand, you're going to have all this Atlantic moisture coming in and a little bit of upper air energy, so that I think is going to probably produce some rain out of all of this. And again, this is going to take us at least into Sunday or Monday of next week. After that, models kind of differ a bit in terms of the direction of where this is going to go in the longer term as we go through next week and into the first full week of June. When we look at the GFS, and I'm going to bring that image up next, and this is for the middle part of next week, you're still seeing some semblance of blocking here back up that way, up near Greenland and Iceland. You've got a low that's well east of Newfoundland. It starts out at 50 degrees north, 50 degrees west. It moves a little bit further to the east, but you still have troughing that results in the eastern part of the United States, so that the jet stream continues to remain displaced pretty far to the south, and you still have a ridge that is building somewhat in southeastern Canada. So as a result, you're going to have some kind of surface high and a continuation of the onshore flow. And this would take us into the middle of next week if that is the case. So be prepared for my neck of the woods at least, for a long gloomy period. I will say, however, that the European offers a slightly different, albeit skeptical solution in my view. And the reason why I'm skeptical about this is because the European has been very guilty recently of making too much out of troughs that are coming out of Canada and moving into the northeast, particularly into southeastern Canada, that part of the trough that the model has been overdoing them. And when reality plays in, as we get closer and closer to the reality, it winds up being a much different look. The European actually brings a rather strong shortwave into the northeast later Tuesday night into early Wednesday, but the bottom line here is that it's got a completely different look in eastern Canada. This would suggest that you would get a cold front to move through, and weather systems will just start moving along again, and then in comes a high from central Canada with some cool, dry air that winds up coming down into the northeast for the middle part of next week. So it has a different idea after we get through the weekend about what may or may not happen in the eastern part of the United States for next week. But I'm going to lean to the more gloomy solution here, because I think that at the end of the day probably makes a bit more sense. And we've already seen long periods where we've had to deal with this sort of thing with the onshore flow. So at this point, let's bring up the latest. We got the latest GFS out at least far enough, and we can take a look at a few things regards to what the model sees as potential rainfall. And here we go. This is going into June. You know, if you're really looking forward to long periods of warm weather, it's just not happening. Okay, so there you have, as of this evening, you've got a low in south central Tennessee representing what's left of Alberto. That low winds up continuing to move northward, and it's absorbed with energy that's coming out of the northern plains. There's your high for Wednesday. Now, we had temperatures up my way near 90 today. It's going to be about 15 to 20 degrees cooler on Wednesday, because the wind is going to be from the east and southeast, with that high sitting in eastern Maine. And that will also put us close to the cloud line. It's probably going to be somewhere in central New Jersey. So from central New Jersey southward, you'll be in a lot of clouds tomorrow. But from north of there, up into southern New England and in the Hudson Valley and places to the north and east, may actually have a fair amount of sunshine tomorrow. Although, again, it may only get into the 70s, and coastal areas may probably only be in the 60s. You can see that the rain the model produces during the day tomorrow. Then we move into Thursday. A little bit of diurnal stuff going on where it fades out at night and then fires up again during the day. The rain is going to have a tougher time getting to the east during the day Thursday. It's going to struggle a bit. Then Friday, here comes a cold front. So Friday looks like to be one of those isolated, very warm days. Cold front comes through, and we get into some showers or maybe even a thunderstorm. And to the north of that, you can see the isobars all across southeastern Canada, the Great Lakes. They're all showing northeast winds coming in from Labrador south and west into the Great Lakes. So that's cool air, and for me it's marine air. And with all that troughing in the mid-Atlantic and southward, you're going to have some kind of a low that's going to form. Now here's one of the things to watch for over the weekend. Does the high to the north build down far enough south that we get drier air that eventually works its way in? I think that that's something you have to consider. This late afternoon run of the GFS is kind of showing that idea, at least so far. But when we look at the prior run, and I'll back one run here, we see that the model doesn't quite do that, focusing more on the energy in the south being far enough to the north where you get a low that develops along the coast, and this sort of persistent onshore flow bringing in moisture and rain for Saturday and Sunday. If you're looking for good weather this weekend, if you're in my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, you want that high to build down and kind of suppress everything far enough south. If the block is stronger, that may happen. If the block is weaker than forecast but still there to some degree, then you're going to probably wind up with this thing, whatever lower pressures there are to the south, actually setting up a bit further north than modeled. But right now, at least through the day run, and the European kind of goes along with this. I didn't really look at the Canadian model, but we can take a look at that as well. And here we have it. Canadian model, sort of has the idea of the onshore flow. Then as we head into Sunday, you've got that low sitting east of New Jersey, south of Long Island. But the Canadian, like the European, wants to move it away and bring a cold front through here along about Tuesday, which would dry things out. The GFS has a different notion where it wants to hold on to that onshore flow for at least half of next week. So I think that's one of the real things, one of the many things we're going to have to consider in the longer term here as far as the weather for my area is concerned, is if the block is stronger than forecast, then you could wind up with a good outcome weather-wise, although it will be a rather cool one, but I'll take it. One day without the AC going, especially when half your air conditioning is still not working, is better than having to deal with heat and humidity. By the way, through all of this pattern, as we go through the long range, I really don't see any big heat scenarios for my area, at least. But I will we'll start with present time, and again, you can watch that block just sort of build as it builds over near Greenland. You get that troughing, and this is the Canadian, by the way, and there comes that sharp trough like the European into eastern Canada early next week. So the GFS is decidedly different on this idea. And then once that pulls out, you still have a big upper high sitting near the Azores here. So it looks like those models may want to show some kind of transition happening maybe beyond day 9 or 10. I remain skeptical here. Here's the GFS's view on the new run. And, you know, there's your block that develops, your low that's out sitting southeast of Newfoundland, helping to displace that jet to the south. But the block looks stronger on the in-between run, and as a result, you know, you wind up with the moisture field to the south being pushed even further south. And with regards to afterwards, you know, at the very end of the period, the GFS actually does want to bring a bit of a ridge into the eastern part of the United States. But you know what? Get me there first. I'm also skeptical of where this is going toward the end of the period, since we really haven't seen too many ridges in the east this spring. They've popped up here and there for a day or so, and that's been about it. So that's in the world of long-term speculation. So I'm not going to really play in that game, at least not at the moment. So I'm going to come to the board now. So hang on one second and say hi to everybody. Got a nice crowd tonight. Good to see all of you here. I saw that Nick Cortez hit Super Chat tonight, and I thank you for that. That gets me a cigar for the drive home. Is that extremely rare for a very strong tropical storm, almost hurricane strength, to hit the U.S. in late May? It is very rare, Nick. This didn't reach hurricane strength. It is only there've only been 4 hurricanes in the month of May total since 1851. So that's one thing about Alberto. Another thing is the fact that it was in the Gulf of Mexico, of which there have only been 4. So this is the 5th. Anthony Orr, who is on from time to time and is very good with doing the research and data on tropical storms and hurricanes and just about anything else weather-wise, points out that Alberto becoming a subtropical storm at the latitude of 19.3 degrees north is the furthest south that a subtropical storm has ever formed. Of course, that's kind of one of those, it's a tough statistic, if only because of the fact that it is May. It's doubtful that you would see a subtropical storm form during the peak hurricane months of you know, August, September into October, that far south. That would be almost unimaginable. But you might see something like that come out and say in May or June or November. But all in all, that is still pretty far south for a subtropical system to form, because the West Caribbean water temperatures are usually pretty warm. The upper atmosphere may not necessarily be, and the middle part of the atmosphere may not necessarily be, but the water is usually pretty supportive of something tropical. Perhaps in the instance of Alberto, the fact that it was so close to the Yucatan Peninsula prevented it from developing to begin with. And of course, you've had this other trough in the Gulf of Mexico that brought down some drier air. And Nick, no hot weather through the first half of June. I think what we're going to see, at least through the first week or week to 10 days, you're going to have the odd day here and the odd day there where it gets very warm. And then you're going to go back into whatever the primary pattern is. And that seems to be where what happened during the month of May. With this blocking pattern developing, I don't see that changing during the month of June, or at least anytime soon. Let's put it that way. You, Gary Rivard, in Michigan with middle 90s, I don't care for the heat either. By the way, just a side note, Decorah, Iowa, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they've been on PBS and national, some nature magazines and so on. There is and they were on, you can watch them if you Google Decorah, Decorah, Iowa eagles. There's been a nesting pair of eagles. This is actually the second female. The male's first mate died a few years ago, and he took a second mate. And every year they nest in Decorah, Iowa, and this nest that was built built very close to a fish hatchery, which was very smart planning and good real estate selection by the eagles, because it gave them basically an almost limitless source of food. Well, every year they lay their eggs, they raise their chicks to adulthood, and as I last checked, all their chicks over the years have survived. But this year, because of the heat, because of the heat that occurred in that part of the U.S., and the fact that this was basically a late clutch of eggs for this, the second clutch of eggs that was laid by this eagle. The eagles hatched late, and they were kind of caught in this heat, and they were still so young that their bodies hadn't developed to the point where they can, regulate their body temperatures well. So they were both lost, unfortunately. But I was kind of sad to hear that, because this just actually happened about 4 days ago when the two chicks had died. But if you're interested in wildlife, that's a great place to watch. And there's a number of YouTube videos that you can take a look at. That's the Decorah Eagles, Decorah, and they have a live camera. Just go to Google and you can watch raptors in action. And I know, Nick, you want a west wind. You can keep the west wind. The west wind will just make the land hot and keep the ocean cold. Beautiful day, Charlie Baker, in southeastern PA, as is up here. Yeah, this nice, rare full day of sunshine with days of an onshore flow. And we're going to go back to that onshore flow tomorrow and Thursday, and then a break on Friday as we warm up, and then back into the onshore flow for Saturday and into next week. Blocking back box 505, hoping blocking won't affect upstate New York as much as the coast. You'll just be cool and dry up there. You're going to Lake George in June 7th to 10th. I mean, you'll just basically be cool and dry. I think if you like cool and dry weather, then upstate New York and northern New England might be nice. For the first part of June. And yes, you'll probably have to go, Israel, to northern New Jersey. Figure north of Route 78. You certainly will get more sun than if you would be south of Route 78. And you're quite welcome. I really appreciate it. Those are very kind words. I try to just kind of, I try to not, I don't want to say I keep it simple because I don't. I get fairly technical, but what I try to do is explain things so that you get it. Because I want you to come back here and as you learn more about weather, and you obviously, if you've been here for a while, you know how incredibly complex a lot of this stuff is in terms of trying to come up with a forecast. So I'm very glad to to see the kind words that you've said, because that's what I'm trying to do. And it's keep it interesting, at the same time keeping it real. I do not we don't get into the hype thing here. We describe what's going on. We talk about what the possibilities are. I give you what my opinion is of what's going to happen, and that's what it is. And when it's right, it's right, and when it's wrong, it's wrong, and I'm the first one to admit it when things don't go the way I think they're going. Delvin's on. I was wondering, Delvin, I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. Lisa M., Aaron Raybear, Ryzen fan, T-Bear, and Mirtha Gunter. Your husband sent, my husband sent you a short video of flooding in our town Saturday the 26th on your Facebook page, David Gunter. Okay, great. I'll look for it. All right, and thank you so much for sending that to me. I hope that the rains have subsided some where you are, although the flood watches do continue for your area. Also saying some higher winds yesterday, none today. Good, that's good to last night, but not today. Good to hear. All right, and tree branches down here in Boone, North Carolina from Sebastian P. You're still going to have to deal with some more downpours and thunderstorms over the next day or two or three. This one thing with this block, the way it's setting up, it's going to keep you in showers and downpours on and off probably through the weekend and into next week. If that block is stronger and pushes the frontal boundary further south, it's actually going to set up for more wet weather action in the southern mid-Atlantic and in the southeastern part of the United States. All right, folks, I got to call it a night at this point. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Just want to mention there's a link to Amazon on the descriptor to this live stream and on the video. I'm a participant in the Amazon Services Associates program, and it's a way for my channel to earn some fees from Amazon. If you shop on Amazon and you go through that link, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back some coin and everybody's happy. And just as an important side note, you don't have to buy whatever comes up on the page in terms of recommendations. If you just search for whatever it is you're looking for in the search bar, that'll work too, okay? And I appreciate it very much, those of you who have gone there in the past and have used the Amazon link on my channel. As I said, it's a great, easy way to support this channel, and it keeps it free, and everybody's happy. All right, folks, have a great evening. We will see you tomorrow. There's no Joe Rayo, Joe Cioffi show tonight or tomorrow night. Joe has a couple of days off. He'll be back on Thursday. I will be on tonight on Facebook. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi is my Facebook page, and you can check me out there. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock on my YouTube channel.